Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, it's a real honor. Thank you, Tom. Thank you for Fertasa. And it's great to be in, or have this opportunity to discuss Rhizobium. The things that I would like to touch on today is about quality and efficiency of soybean Rhizobium. And hopefully I'll answer some of, or maybe touch on some of those questions as well that we were asked outside. So from MBFI side, I just would like to give you a bit of a history of where soybean inoculants or Rhizobium and the production and the industrialization of that comes from. If we look in the 1980s at the bottom here, right at the bottom here, we see that we started off with non-sterile peat inoculants. In the 1990s, that moved to sterilized peat products. In the early 2000s, products that were developed in the liquid formulations, but at 1 × 10⁻⁹. Then in 2010, in South Africa, we actually had the first formulations of products that contained 10⁻⁻10 bacteria or cells per milliliter. And I think that's where one of the major steps in 2010, as we start seeing it was almost a decade between each other, we started accelerating that research into the Rhizobia. Then having in 2011 developing various different technologies that are like osmolytic technology, signal generation. We're talking about flavonoids now, not factors. How do we actually generate the signals and create those cascades actually happening, and preparing our braided Rhizobium to actually be able to do that once treated on the seed, and then various other technologies. In 2012, commercializing a pack. And I think as we're going through, we're seeing that we've had to look at this last one in 2018 is optimizing strain optimization in different varieties of soybeans, and making sure that the variety that we're planting is then also strain optimized. And there are variations between that. We did that with Anthony Jarvie with a really great research over a couple of seasons where he did a lot of work on optimization of the strain formulation technology. But then once we find a strain, that strain might not be optimizing for industrialization. So it's quite a difficult and tricky situation where you have the combination of the two situations. Just to give you some, or another one, in 2019, we started our liquid fermentation plant in South Africa. And then in 2022, the same, or just a slightly bigger plant in the US, where we actually manufacture inoculant for the US market as well. So I think there's going to be more and more technologies coming out. The new, from our side, there's definitely several big new activating or let's say key indicators where we can actually increase the Rhizobium efficiency and significantly increase nitrogen fixation. And that's why we've been able to have to research a lot, and I'll show you a bit more about the research now. But I first would like to start off with, I think, a topic that we all not really, well, we all talk about it, but do we really understand this? So I've got on the side here 1 × 10⁻⁻10 and 10 × 10⁻⁻10. I'm sorry I didn't change this picture to a fertilizer, NPK. I apologize, but I use glyphosate in my explanation. But we can use nitrogen, NPK fertilizer. So let's take, for argument's sake, a nitrogen source of urea. What do we have in urea? We have a 46% concentration of urea. Okay. If we talk about ammonium sulfate, what concentration do we have? 21. Ammonium nitrate? 28. So what is the difference between a product that contains 10⁻⁶ and 10⁸? A few zeros. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the crux about biologicals. That is 100 times difference. It's not a 10 times. You can't take urea and then make it instead of having, so from a urea to an ammonium sulfate, you have 21% or you have a 46%. That's close to double. 2 times difference. But when we're talking about a biological with a 10 to the power of 6 to the 10 to the power of 7, it's 10 times. 10 to the power of 7 to 10 to the power of 8, another 10 times. So now we're talking about a product that's going from 10 to the power of 6 to the 10 to the power of 8, we're talking about 100 times. And if we go to 9, it's 1,000 times. To the 10, it's 10,000 times. So that you're just trying to imagine if we had to take a product that's concentrated at 1 times 10 to the power of 6, we have to use 10,000 mils compared to a product that's concentrated at 10 to the power of 10, only 1 milliliter to get the same efficiency. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the difference between bulk and nutrition or glyphosate in this specific situation compared to a microorganism. There is an infinite variation in the concentration. And we need to make sure that we are looking at that and being able to provide good quality products that are efficient in high quantity of numbers. So if we had to look at the reason for nitrogen, it's used in every single aspect of the plant. We can look at from the leaves, the chlorophyll, which is really important for the light intensity and the uptake of, or the use of photosynthesis. When we look at pods, the protein content, plant tissue, the plant growth, and then the roots obviously for nutrients and water uptake. So there's a huge importance, and nitrogen is directly linked to the yield factor of soybeans. So the more nitrogen we can get available and make available to the plant, the better our yield will be at the end of the day. If we look at factors that influence or factors of nitrogen requirements for soybeans, we have in our green book from Fertasa and also all the way around the world, a range of about between 70 and 105 kilograms per ton of soybeans produced, or 70 to 105 kilograms of nitrogen required for every ton produced of soybeans. This is very different to maize. Maize needs, if I could have somebody, how many kilograms of nitrogen does a ton of maize require? 15. So we have a very different crop here. We have a crop that requires high amounts of nitrogen compared to maize. And the vastness is very big. So if we had to look at, next one is the one big thing that we would like to, is point number 4. From R1, you're looking at 4.5 kilograms of assimilation of nitrogen per day, per hectare on soybeans. 4.5 kilograms per day. That's huge. So if we don't have the nodules, if we don't have the structure, we don't have the inoculation there and correctly done at that time, we're not going to get enough nitrogen to support our plant growth. The other thing is, in soybeans compared to maize, we're only seeing around 25% of our crop, our vegetative crop, by R1 in soybeans. Compared to maize at R1, we've seen almost 95% of the crop size. So we have a massive vegetative growth stage at the same time as we also needing to assimilate nitrogen for pot production or soybean production. So nitrogen is a huge requirement. And if we look at soybean inoculants, you can fix between 180 to 250 kilograms. These are general guidelines. I've seen a higher amount or through testing. But when we do a registration test, we use a non-limiting factor of nitrogen of 200 kilograms of nitrogen units. So that will equal to close to half a ton, 460 or 480 kilograms of urea, or 720 kilograms of limestone ammonium nitrate, or LAN, which we apply for 1 hectare. So that will be the same as your bacteria treatment on your seed. Okay, so imagine a pallet of LAN or CAR-N, Langsmay, for 1 little packet of inoculant. That's what we've been able to do, the technology. Okay. So, if we have to look at the roots, I'm not going to go into too much detail. Yeah, you did such a good job on that, so thank you for that. But there's so much discussion on this. And how do we actually go from a plant emitting these flavonoids and binding to the membrane of the soybean? I look at it in a different way. I would like to, and soybeans have a specific interaction with the other person or with the crop. So I would like to start off with saying, hello, my name is John. Yeah. So we have to have this happen between our soybean seedling that we put in the plant on our seed and our rhizobia. The better the communication between myself and Stefan, the better the reaction that we're going to be able to cause. Okay, but we need to be able to talk to each other. We need to have the same language. We have to be able to communicate and be able to interact. If we don't have that, we're not going to be able to go forward and actually become and have this mutual relationship. And that's an important requirement. The next thing is, how do we make products or make rhizobia more efficient? So if we had to go and put into a technology, a product where you're having more signals, I'm phoning Jacques now. Okay. Imagine we could put, thank you, Jacques. Imagine we can put into our technologies signals or better communication strategies, get better technologies that we can actually start communicating on more higher technologies, like myself phoning Jacques right now. If we could do that, how much higher nitrogen could we actually create for the plant, and how do we actually be able to, could we increase the yield? And the answer is yes, we can. Through technology and through developing these technologies, we are able to find signaling molecules and also better communication methods through this structure. Okay. So, a bit of a trick question. Maybe put a jacket on this or something. Okay, but we're looking at primary and secondary nodules, and we're going to get to some interesting information about primary and secondary nodules. So let's say the plant had 20 nodules on it. Let's just say for argument's sake, or 10 nodules. But they all sat on the secondary nodules, or secondary structure of your plant roots, compared to only 2 on your primary root. The same size, but 20 versus 2. What is the difference between the nitrogen fixation of a primary nodule compared to a secondary nodule, or secondary root structure nodule? Anyone? 10 times, 100%. So we can have 20 nodules on the secondary structure and only 2 on the primary structure. And it's identical nitrogen fixation. So nitrogen fixation, nodulation on primary root structure is super important. And that's where we actually start measuring how well our nodulation or inoculant is actually being treated and actually being effective on the plant. Okay, so if we had to look at this slide, for argument's sake, we can see that as the increasing concentration of inoculant, we go from a 10 to the 7 over here, and the third over here, so 10 to the 7. Now we jump 10 times, 10 times, 10 times. And we can see that the nodules around, if you take the entire root structure, hasn't changed significantly. But the amounts of nodules on the primary root have gone from 0.3 nodules on the primary root structure to 7.1. And that means a huge influence and a significant amount of nodulation that increases nitrogen fixation. In some countries in South America, specifically like Argentina, high organic matter, they contain a gram of soil. When they test it, they contain 10 to the power of 8 rhizobia per gram of soil. Our sandy soils in South Africa in the Western Free State or the Northwest, I don't believe that it has even a 10 to the power of 1. But yes, it's a very different condition and a very different situation. Sorry, I'm going the wrong way. So we try to classify what is a good amount of bacteria per seed, and we've tried to use international data as well as our own data, but we've classified this as very good, average, and bad. So anything under 10 to the power of 4 on the seed, it's a really bad inoculation or number of bacteria per seed, and a very good is anything above 10 to the 5 times 10 to the 5. And we do this research on a daily basis. We have a full laboratory that tests this for multiple companies, where we actually do these on-seed treatments, on-seed viabilities for the industry. going the wrong way the whole time. Okay. Active and inactive nodules. Most of them, I'm sure, have seen a nodule, but active and inactive nodules are really important. Coenzymes, for argument's sake, molybdenum, cobalt, form part of the structure of the nitrogenase enzyme, which then actually forms and helps this nitrogen fixation happen. If we have a brown nodule, we have a nodule that's not fixing nitrogen. And if the darker the red goes, and we've actually been able to test like a light pink, a darker middle pink, and the higher your index of red is, the higher the nitrogenase enzyme is. The higher the nitrogen that we can be able to produce for our plant. Yeah. Okay, what are important things and features about an inoculant? Research and laboratories, people that are, and HR, or people that are well qualified, that can look at this on a consistent basis. Because a dilution between myself and, if I had to do a dilution, and let's say Vilma over there did a dilution, could be different, but we have to follow the same protocols, same procedures, and be consistent through our results. So laboratories and making sure that our consistency is there all the time. The other thing is, if we don't only do just plates when we're testing our Rhizobium, we actually do it on seed in a growing chamber. So every batch or every product will be, a batch of product that's been manufactured will actually be, a Rhizobium test will be done in a growing chamber to identify that the actual nature of the inoculant will fix or make nodules on the specific crop. Sorry, the last one is the Rhizobium is a very, well, I'm going to go through what it entails as far as a Rhizobium is concerned as far as a product. But I think the biggest, and it's a very hard thing with Rhizobium, or to make a sterile biological product, is quite a significant process on large scale. It's quite nice and easy when we do it in a reactor of a 1 liter or 2 or 5 liter reactor. But when we have to take this to a 20,000 or 30,000 liter reactor, the processes that go into that and the amount of backwards or the behind the scenes technology that has to be done to produce that on a consistent basis without contamination is significant. So next thing is trials. We do trials and we trial and we trial and we trial. If we look at the last 10 years, of the last 12 years, we've done over 55,000 test plots in South Africa. That means almost 132 hectares of test plots, not only specifically just Rhizobium, but in biologicals, microbials in a totality. This is a huge amount of in-field data where we're getting it from Bethel all the way through to Pritzker site and all the way in between, which is hugely important to bring ensure that local data, local conditions, local soils are understood with the product that we're testing. Okay, so what makes a good product? I try to list a couple of things to what makes a good product or what makes a feasible product in the industry. First and foremost, it needs to be registered. We have to go through field trials, we have to go through dossier formation. This will take you several years, but under the CP regulations, chemical regulations, under the L regulations. A product that will contain at least 1 × 10 to the power of 10 at manufacturing. So they could drop in your production, sorry, in your storage over a period of 12 months or 18 months down to 10 to the power of 9, 1 × 10 to the power of 9, but at manufacturing at least a 1 × 10 to the power of 10 formulation. Sterility, either in powder or in liquids, have a very high viable count, and then a long-term shelf life, 12 to 18 months. These are really important, guys. Viability of products can happen. We can make, I can assure you that a lot of people can make a product that lasts 1 month. The thing is to make it last 3 months, to make it last 6 months, or even 2 years almost, is that's the way the challenging side, because it's a growing bacteria. It's not a spore former. The next one is a practical application method. I think this is one of the hardest and trickiest, is because application is a lot of our success in our field. If we don't apply the product well and it's not practical, the success of the product will definitely reduce. Compatibility with either biological or chemical insecticides, fungicides, nematicides, being part of an integrated pest management system, either via seed treatment or via application in furrow. High viability of the bacteria on the seed for up to 21 days. And please, if you guys research, and we get onto Google, we research these wonderful pre-treatment times of the US and in Canada, 120, 180 days. They live in a fridge 90% of the time. We are different. So a product that would have 120 days comfortably in the US or in Canada would have a minimum or a maximum of 21 days in South Africa, if they even get to that time, because their conditions are completely different. Low viable rates that you're applying to the seed or in furrow applications, sterile packaging. This is really, really important. The sterility of the product, the packaging, the actual products that goes out there. Sometimes we actually have these in our bladders. We have them actually swell up a little bit. If they start smelling quite badly, like a spilt milk or spent milk, it means that there's a contaminant that's got through the plastic, because it's actually breathable. It's got little pores in it, and actually is breathable, and it can actually go. It can cause that, but it's not generally when we're making a 10,000 liter reactor or 15 or 20,000 liter reactor of product. 1 or 2 bags would have that through transportation and the breaking of that. Then potential technologies with good strains, with local and international seed varieties, high quality of manufacturing with sterile and constant production. I do believe that growing chamber and highly equipped laboratory is essential, and then large volume of in-field trials to make sure that product is tested and tested again. Because we have a gentleman that said that we have, a very high, or let's say high temperatures, low soil moisture. Next year you might have great soil moisture, and then it disappears at R1 or R2. And how do we manage that? Because the environment's always changing. But I would like to discuss that more in detail when we have a cup of coffee outside. Okay, so a treatment versus untreated. And this is what we would like to be seeing, is a high amount of those nodules. And if you took a matchbox just under the seed where it's actually been planted from the root base, and you took a matchbox, that's generally where you would find the inoculation that would have happened from the treatment. You could have secondary nodulation, and that would be because of your in-furrow application. Also, it could also be due to conditions, dry conditions, where you're actually having the rhizobium actually only once it's got water, it's actually infected, but that's at a much later stage. But then poor nitrogen fixation will happen. But that matchbox is what you'll be looking for when you're doing a trial. Treatments, just different treatments in fields, and what it actually looks like, where you have the differences between the treatments, or let's say lack of a treatment versus a treatment of nitrogen fixation. I think I would like to, I don't have many more slides left, but I would like to leave you with a thought. Rhizobium is nitrogen in a bacteria form. So if we had to take a production of and uses 750,000 liters of inoculant, we would need to burn 3.2 billion liters of oil to produce 1.8 million tons of nitrogen in the urea form. You guys with it? So we have to burn 3.2 billion liters of oil to convert that into nitrogen fertilizer into 1.8 million kilograms or tons of urea. But via 750,000 liters of inoculant, we can produce the same amount of nitrogen for our legume crops. So we're in the nitrogen business. Rhizobium is in the nitrogen business. We are here to produce high quality nitrogen fixation products, which is going to give you nitrogen, which then feeds your crop. Okay. Thank you for your time.
Are there any questions for Jonathan? Sure, there are many.
Ja, ek gaan nou Afrikaans praat. Ek weet julle het al genoeg Engelse vrae gehad. Ek sê bang ek kry die antwoord terug en ek moet dit nou met hulle hulle boere gaan verduidelik, so hulle gaan my weg, ja. Okay, ons kry goeie nodulasie, ons kry goeie enstof, dankie, julle het ook baie goeie enstowwe. Wat kan jy doen om jou nodules langer aktief te hou? Ons weet hier op R3, R4 begin hulle afneem. Is daar enige iets wat ons kan doen om ons nodules langer aktief te hou? En dan, hoeveel nodules kyk julle nou op die penwortel vir 'n normale oes van 3 ton?
Ja, 100%. Nee, baie dankie. Ek verstaan dit heeltemal. Ek verstaan Afrikaans heel goed, maar my selfvertroue voor 'n groep mense is nie so goed nie. So amount of nodules, let me go to that one first. That's quite a hard one because it's more about the dry nodular mass. So it could be one massive nodule, it could be 10 small nodules, as long as the primary nodule, the actual nodules fixed on that primary nodule base. And it's really about a amount of dry nodular mass. And that's actually in milligrams that per plant that you'd actually get. So I would say, as a general rule, from a farmer agronomical point of view, I would be looking at least 2 to 5 main nodules on a plant, on a single plant, that on the main primary root would be sufficient for a 3 to 4 ton crop that you'll be looking for. So going back to your first question, what can we do to increase the shelf life of nodulation or nodules being actively used? As far as we need to be able to increase the solar panel usage. So if we have to, so products for argument's sake like molybdenum, like boron, and also keeping the plant, we've got this situation where the plant is now in a vegetative state, but also in a reproductive state. So where does it put all its energy? And it's a really hard thing to keep those nodules carrying on past R3 to R4 because they start senescing, because the plant is almost finished using them. So it also depends if we can use different biostimulants in that later part of the is really good. But then also using, for argument's sake, various fungicides with a stray, let's say a stay green or reducing of ethylene, that will also increase the nodules quite significantly. But I would say using of fungicides, either biological or let's say a bacillus or a strobilurin, or to keep that activity of ethylene suppressed as much as possible. Molybdenum and cobalts will be your two major indicators as far as longevity of your nodules, and you can keep them a bit longer. If you do face a very, very dry time in that period or very wet time, you're going to have that senescing naturally, and that is a bit of like what we're seeing this year. We're seeing that at R3 and R4, we're actually seeing a lot of funny nodules what eintlik doodgaan because of too much water. There it's a very different situation where you can't, it's an environmental factor. But you can, but with good biostimulants, you can increase that longevity of the foliar nutrition products. Definitely.
Okay, morning. Okay,
Morning.
I just wanted to find out, are there any specific rhizobium strains you use when you're making these soybean inoculants?
Yes, we do, definitely. We have in our culture bank, a lot of different strains, from the SEMAs 5079, 5080, WB74 for South Africa, as well as then all the USDA's strains. We've got, I'm not 100% sure, I'll have to get back to you with that number, but it's in a lot of, in double digits for sure. So there's differences. I mean, for argument's sake, a USDA 442, for argument's sake, is a very cold culturing rhizobium, where a USDA, which has got the most research globally on, is a 110, and that's more in a very warm condition. Generally, the SEMAs, and I might be pronouncing it wrong, but SEMIA, 5079, 5080, as well as then WB74 on good genetics for South Africa.
It's SEMA, sorry?
SEMA, yeah, SEMIA. And I mean, we have seen some compatibility issues with, I believe it is 442 on certain varieties, especially the longer varieties, not the shorter varieties, because that's generally used up in Canada or with the double zeros up in North America.
Okay, so all of them, the inoculants will be in liquid form? Or?
From our side, yes, the liquid form, you do get powders, which you can. The problem is with powders is the concentration per gram of product is much lower than in a liquid. And also the mass production of that and the quality control of small powder applications are quite limited compared to mass production in 20,000 liter reactors.
Okay, thank you.
Ek wil net graag hoor, mens kry baie keer knoppies op 'n diepte van self 50 cm in die grond. Sal dit wees as gevolg van die voorkoms van natuurlike rhizobium in die grond? Of kan die rhizobium baie keer 'n bietjie afbeweeg deur die grond? Hoekom sal mense dit kry so ver van die plant af?
So I think it's going to be a combination of, there is definitely natural rhizobium in soils. We're finding it throughout the world, and that's where we get our isolates from. So there's definitely natural rhizobium. The question is, do they fix nitrogen, and in what quantity and in how, or what value? So for argument's sake, I know that in the, let's say for argument's sake, Carolina area, in the more the eastern growing part of the, let's say the mist belts in South Africa, a lot of people have said that they don't need rhizobium because they can see the nodulation happen. But when there was intern in Brapa did a really great study over 20 years, where they did a seed treatment where they have, or they did a seed treatment of fresh inoculant or high good quality inoculant of over 20 years on the same block with a rhizobia that is at 10 to the power of 8 per gram of soil. And they got a minimum of 200 kilograms yield response year on year for the last, for over 20 years. So to answer your first, or the question, I do believe that could be natural rhizobia, but the question is, do they actually fix nitrogen, and what is the effect that they're actually doing? Ek hoop ek antwoord jou vraag.
Baie dankie.
As jy rhizobium, ons sit die rhizobium op die put en ons sit dit in die voor. In die oorsee in Argentinië sit hulle verskillende maatskappye of verskillende strains. Is dit nadelig om verskillende een in die voor te sit, een maatskappy sin in die voor en een op die put? Ek weet julle wil almal julle eie albei plekke hê, maar wat is die voor en die nadeel van verskillende strains wat jy een in die voor sit en een op die put? Is dit werk hulle te mekaar of werk hulle simbioos met mekaar?
Ja, baie interessante vraag. Dit kom op baie. So ek dink nie dis nadelig, glad nie. Die groot ding is meer die effektiwiteit van daai produk. So if we had to look at, for argument's sake, the same quantity of, let's say, nitrogen fixing bacteria in one product versus the other product. Let's say they had the same concentration. They have two different strains. One is a 5079 and a 5080. That efficiency will not have a problem. The question would be is if you had to bring that product that you're putting in furrow at 2 times 10 to the 9, for argument's sake, of lower quality product, and then you're doing a seed treatment with a higher quality product, then there will be a difference in efficiency. So try and stick with your efficiency. I don't believe that the strains are competing unless you choose a very cold strain, which we don't really use, or we don't use in South Africa. I've seen one or two products catalogs like that, and we've tested them, but they actually didn't contain and the big one is 442 from the US. Generally, we don't see that in South Africa. I would say that almost every South African company makes use of the same strains. So it's really about the formulation, the quality of that formulation, rather than the, don't believe that there's many variations in the strains. So it's more the technology that goes inside the formulation. And sorry, maybe just to, I think the biggest thing is Bradyrhizobium, and maybe Brigitte's going to get into some of that. Bradyrhizobium is a very slow-growing microorganism. So it's not a quick one. So any contaminants within your formulation has a massive impact on your actual yield effect that you're going to get. So contamination is a critical thing that we have to make sure that we don't have in the package. But once you've actually opened the packet, the sterile packet that's never seen a non-HEPA filtered air, that we actually store that correctly or use it within 24 hours or as quickly as possible on the seed. So contamination and other microorganisms like a trichoderma is far quicker. It's like almost like if you could say, a tortoise in Brady Rhizobium and a cheetah. Dis so groot verskil.
Yes, Jonathan, ek wil vinnig by jou hoor. Kom ons sê 'n kliënt het verlede seisoen, soos hy nou gesê, soyaboontjies geplant en jy kom laat agter. So hulle het eers laat in Desember geplant. Nou kom jy agter hulle het nie norulasie nie. Nou het ons gaan stikstof gooi, ons het laer van dit spuit, ons kry reaksie, maar soos jy gesê het, die hoeveelheid stikstof wat jy moet gee is enorm. Is daar 'n manier om later nog 'n bietjie inokulasie te veroorsaak, kan jy dit deur die pivot sit? Daar's nie, dis eintlik oorplant, nee. Daar's nie 'n ander opsie nie.
Ons probeer, maar dit is nie 'n werkbare stelsel. Jy gaan 'n stikstof moet opsit, ja, seker. Dit is die beste opsie vir jou beste ROI op daai stadium. So ons het 'n kalender, of ons probeer obviously elke jaar se plantdatum is bietjie anderste, maar ons wil ten minste as ons blokke gaan kyk, dis dit 40 dae na plant of na opkoms van daai soyboon, en daai soyboon moet op daai stadium al reeds goeie knoppies gevorm het. En as ons nie in die ooste, so we've got an eastern and western area. If we do it in the east and it's not good at 40 days, we wait another 10 days, and if there's no rain, or if there's rain in that period and we reevaluate it at 50 days, our latest will be to apply nitrogen will be on 60 days post-emergence, to get the massive or the reaction that we would like to apply.
Sorry, it was just a follow-up question again.
Perfect.
Because what happened was at V2, normally you have plus or minus 6 nodules
Yes.
on the primary root. So what happened was at R1, only then I started getting nodulation. Now, my question would be, will I fix enough nitrogen at that stage? I mean, my assumption is if you start fixing nitrogen from vegetative growth, then most of the nitrogen will move up the plant, and at R1, R3, where you need it the most, it's readily available. But if you start fixing it at R1 or R2, how much nitrogen are you going to store for the plant to use it effectively? That's, yeah,
I understand. That's a very cool question. Yeah. So there's some really interesting data on that, where it actually shows that a plant, a soybean plant, we only see 25% of its vegetative growth or structure by R1. So 25% of its crop, the foliage. So if that crop is sitting at around 30 centimeters, you're only seeing 30%. So that's where, so to create the structure and the foundation you need, and generally that's where nitrogen from the soil or remaining of, or let's say residual nitrogen, the nitrogen fixation, the bacteria is more biostimulant in the early stages. And then from R1, that's when it really kicks in to make nitrogen. So I don't believe, if we look at, for argument's sake, planting in the east and west, in the east, and I talk about the east as basically the N1, anything to the east, N1 from Johannesburg to Bloemfontein, anything to the east of that, generally we have nodulation much earlier, at V2, V3, V4. In the western areas where it's more sandy, we could expect nitrogen fixation or nodules to actually be only present at R1, where we're fixing huge amounts. And the main insurance or the main requirement is from R1 all the way through, because that's when we produce 75% of our crop structure as well as then our entire yield. I hope that answers. So I don't believe that you've lost out if you're only seeing the nitrogen, the nodules form at R1. So we had that a lot in Delmas, this region, this year, Bethel, all the way through because of the dry conditions. And then all of a sudden we had some rain, the activity came back up and we found the nodules were there.
Yes, and you know why I'm asking that? Because as a farmer, you start panicking.
Absolutely.
And now
Absolutely.
you think, should I pour nitrogen? How much should I pour? Am I really going to have a positive result if I pour that nitrogen? And then factor in the cost.
Oh yes. So that's where you need to talk to your local consultant, and I think it's very important, ladies and gentlemen, is where we do get our guys. We have great representatives in this country that we do work on farmer level, agronomy level, that we can do these inspections. Like you're saying, you start stressing, and that's where we are here to do the support and the backup to ensure that we have a stewardship or good stewardship plan for the product. so that if there is a problem at R1 or R2, that we go in with nitrogen, sufficient amount that we actually do sort out the problem. Because the yield, and Tom was talking about it just now, when we talk about a yield of 1.5 tons, we're talking about, at let's say 8,000 Rand, the SAFX fluctuates quite a bit, that's 12,000 Rand. If we had to go in with nitrogen fertilizer, it might only cost us 1,000 or 2,000 Rand. So rather go and sort out the problem in the field than wait until we actually harvesting and then we have the problem. So yeah.
I have one question for you, and that is, there's some talk about, in terms of soya varieties, some nodulate better than others. Is there any truth in that?
So yes, definitely there's some very big truth in it. We don't plant such a variety of groups of soybean varieties in this country. Generally, a 00 will be quite a lot more toxic as far as the chemotoxins or the actual the compounds that are produced on the seed, compared to we grow normally a group 4, 5, and a 6, and maybe a 7, class 7 in South Africa. So a lot of work has been done in that regard as far as the activity and the variety versus the formulation or the strain. We did it in broth mixtures. We didn't do it in any special formulations, and there is definitely a correlation. But most of the let me put it this way: if we had to go to a 00 soybean, class 00, or even into 1 and 2s, there are big differences as far as inoculants are concerned, for sure. But that's not in our country. So we're talking about, this is Saskatchewan in Canada, Minnesota's, they're all planting 00s because they have to get a much quicker growing, or they only have a short window of growing time, and very cold. Where we're growing 4, 5, and 6s, and generally those are our Brady Rhizobiums that are registered in this country are all fit for that purpose in that. But yes, if you do a strain, for argument's sake, 442, USDA strains 442, it won't be compatible, or it's not as well compatibilized with our varieties in this country.
One last one perhaps, Jonathan, and that is a lot of farmers use what we call withheld seed.
Sorry?
They keep seed back from the pre-yard. And we've seen some problems there sometimes from a number of aspects. Maybe you could just talk to that for a second.
Yeah, so I think brown bags are an industry norm. I think the biggest question is, the higher the quality of the inoculant that you're going to put on, the more you, let's say, the more technology that you are, using. Sometimes you're planting a brown bag, and we've seen it in some cases, not even on someone who's certified sometimes. So it's not really maybe just a brown bag situation, but a good quality germination is very important. So, if we have a germination percentage of 60%, for argument's sake, and we have to plant, we have to plant 100 kilograms a hectare to get 60 kilograms of seed. And if the kernels are quite big, then you're planting at 4,500, 5,000 kernels per kilogram. So it really depends on the surface area that we're treating. And I think that you can go into organic material that's still left within the brown bag and the germination quality. So you're actually spreading your inoculant over a whole lot more than just the seed that we are trying to plant. So I know we try and get the best seed, but there's some seed with more sclerotia and organic matter than soybeans in some cases. And it is something that, and I think if we have to look at registered seed, a good quality seed provider is very essential on soybeans. So not that I don't think that brown bagging is not a good thing. I think it's good if you can control it and you can manage it. And I think anything is good in the way you manage it.
Thanks, Jonathan. Maybe one more question for Jonathan. Great, Jonathan. Thank you very much.
Thank you.